You know, how you been doing, man? We gonna start into this thing. How you been doing during this pandemic?
It doesn't matter where you live. Four walls, you end up becoming a prisoner to your own space because we're so used to getting out into the world and touching people, going places, like having lunches, whatever it may be, and you sit at home and it's just like those walls. They, no matter how big your house is, they start to cave in on you.
Well, one thing I always know about you, and you got to help me out here because you ran every day for 10 miles. You stopped that now with the pandemic?
No, I just ran today. I got 10 in a day. You know.
How do you do that? Just go out on the beach, or you run around your neighborhood?
Yeah, I just run through the neighborhood. So I left. I probably left the house about. It was about 7:15, and
Wow.
I was out there. Nobody was on the streets. Today I ran 10 miles. It was a little bit more than I had
Whoa.
been running, but I wanted to, push a little bit. I probably bit off a little more than I would have liked, but I had to get home.
One thing that I'm gonna start out kind of easy with this thing, Ray, because one thing I've always been such a big fan, and the reason I've been such a big fan because I've always felt I was just like you. When you came to the Celtics, you were like that third person. When I came to the Celtics with Larry Bird and McKipp, people actually kind of forget about Ray, and it seemed like it was Paul and Paul and KG, and I always knew it was you. How do you feel about that?
Um, it didn't bother me. It wasn't about, I never did or played a game for a pat on the back. It was all about myself and how I felt about, me doing my job and, being here and being able to be counted on. And I think when we got thrust in situations where it was time to win games, I knew that the ball had to come around my way. And for me, that was probably the biggest, I don't know, the greatest compliment from either the opposing team or my own team, because they knew that if it was a technical foul or if it was just a free throw down the stretch, that they had to find me at some point. So that to me is the greatest compliment, because it really is not about how you start the game, but having your best five in that particular game, finish it. That's the important thing. And I think the true basketball head, the people that love the game, I've had people come up to me since I've been retired and say to me and tell me things that I would do during the game. My pregame routine. Some people would come to the arena and just watch the things I do or did, and I knew that they actually watched because they would describe it to me, and that was something that it created a pregame ritual for them as well, because now they're locked in. Like, I got to go watch this because if I don't, we're gonna lose. So it's things like that that are bigger than somebody saying, "Hey, I'm this guy because he's got 1 million votes for All-Star." For the All-Star weekend starters, but more importantly, someone who's contributed and committed to his craft and gives people the hope and ability in their own games that they can do the same things.
Well, one thing I have to ask you about, and you talk about shots and being ready. Take me through this. The greatest shot, I call it the greatest shot in playoff history. I think you shot it. And I keep talking about it over and over again. That you hit the greatest shot. Well, I hate it was with Miami, but
Yeah.
still the fact that you hit one of the greatest shots in NBA history. Can you talk about it? Do you remember it? What do you remember so well about it? Because everybody talks about what I talk about all the time. Is I said Ray Allen had to catch it, go back behind the line, toe was behind the line. Everybody was holding their breath to see, and then you did exactly like you've done for thousands and thousands of shots.
Yeah, and there was a natural progression to my career, going from, starting in college. People said that I couldn't get my own shot off, and then I got to Milwaukee and I learned to play this up-tempo game where, we were Golden State before Golden State existed. In Milwaukee, we shot fast, and they said it couldn't be done. You couldn't win that way. And then I get shipped out to Seattle to an even younger team where we had this run and gun style where, you know, we had great shooters, you know, guys that could really play. And it was where I kind of honed my leadership skills. And at the same time, I got the opportunity to really shoot the ball and score, to then going to Boston where all that was kind of reeled in. Like I didn't have the opportunity to shoot and score as much, but what didn't change was how I approached the game, how I prepared for the game, because I knew then, just like I knew in Seattle, at some point it was going to come down to free throws, which it always does, or you got to hit a 3-pointer to win a game. And it's not necessarily always you, but everybody has to be prepared and alert. So coming down to 2013 in that final moment, we wouldn't be talking about it if I missed a shot, Max.
Yeah.
So I can
Hey,
tell
but you know what? How about this? All the fans had left the game before you hit the shot.
yeah, and you know that's an indictment on, you know, the culture, the Miami culture here, because there's still a young franchise. You know, unlike Boston where you have generations of fans. You know, you think about going back to the 50s and people who watched Russell and Cousy play. So it's indoctrinated into your to your family. So you grow up in it and you're watching it, and you watch championship basketball then and span the generations, and you watched it forever. So Miami is still going through that process of, you know, you just retired D Wade's number, and he was your first player that's won you 3 championships. So now you see where they go from that to the next generation, and do they win, and you start to build that culture. It's also easier when you're in Miami to, if the game doesn't go the way you want, to kind of turn the page and do something different. You know, when you're
Go out to the beach, baby.
when you're up in Chicago, Philly, New York, Boston, you ride or die with basketball because that's your team in the winter and you have nothing else to do. So it can be depressing if you have a bad team. So in 13, it was like I was in a situation now where I was so prepared. It wasn't like I needed to do anything. Like lines are, I know these lines like the lines on the palm of my hand. You know, I've been there. I know where the basket is, and so the thing reminds me, or I'm always reminded of in that situation. And for any future situation I get thrust in, I can do anything that I want to do and be good at it as long as I prepare. And that was just me preparation. If you collect all the years I've played over the course of the games I've played, the teams I've played on, the situations I've been in, it was, for me, I could have, and we wouldn't be having this conversation, but the fact that I made it, we're having this conversation. But I can tell you millions, or I'd say, you know, 10 to 20 shots that I've missed that cost us games over the course of my career. So I just learned that, you know, you got to get back on the horse, you got to ride again, and you always have the next shot is the most important shot.
Well, the thing I'll ask you going on forward now will be your relationship and your battles that I saw over the years going against Kobe Bryant. And I know how close you were, but I know how far you were from him. And it just seems that you're the kind of guy I need to talk about.
Yeah, and, you know, the game passes you by. And I just remember being a young guy. Kobe and I were riding on the bus. We were going to the Combine in Chicago, and we happened to land in the airport together, and we were sitting on the bus. And, you know, Kobe was a young guy. He was 18 years old, and he admired me, looked up to me because he had watched me in college. Kobe and Rip played against each other, and now Rip is going to UConn. Kobe's getting drafted into the NBA. So we had this. He just had this young excitement, this enthusiasm about him to come into the league and improve himself. So that's the Kobe I always remember whenever I played against him. You know, we always competed, and obviously he wanted to always prove to people that he was better than me because I was drafted higher than him. But that's probably the source behind our rivalry we had an intense rivalry when I played in Seattle, and then obviously playing in the finals in Boston. So it just seemed as though we had so much, going in. We came in together and we went in different directions. So it just seemed like there's a point where you could just sit down and, that 30 for 30 comes out and you get a chance to sit down with your family somewhere on the beach somewhere and just kind of conversate about, everything that you went through. And, there's things that he had to deal with in the year we beat him in 2008. And then when they beat us in 2010, like to be able to share those stories and the year in between, it never will come to fruition. And it was sad to me to know that conversation will never be had, because it wasn't like I had anything against him. I just loved competing against him. I wanted to beat him as much as he wanted to beat me. So it just was, you think about it, it's like, wow, we played a game for a living for our whole lives. And I think in a lot of situations, Max, when you're playing in a city like Boston and LA, has this huge rivalry, and to some extent you're made to hate anything. You know how it is.
Yes.
And but when you get removed from it, you realize, like, what is it that I really hate? I don't hate you. I don't dislike you for anything. We just played a game of basketball, and we won one against you. You won one against us, and it was a great battle. And you just kind of walk away from it and just appreciate the competition and the lessons learned. But you can't walk away from it with any, ill will or any anger, because somebody's got to get the best of somebody at some point, and then you look at, I always make the reference to Russell. I don't know what year he retired, but if you think about that, what was it? What year did he retire? Do you know?
I think I want to say it was 64, maybe, something like that, someplace in there.
So you're talking about Bill Russell retired in 64. He retired 54 years ago. So you're talking about 50 years. I wasn't even alive when he retired. So he has a whole new existence, and what he did on the floor is giving him, the ability to move through the world and be a living legend and be an ambassador for the game of basketball. And you don't see Bill Russell talking about a game that he played or a player that he played against. It's just about his ability to have an impact on the game while he played it, that is so long lasting now, 50 years after he retired.
Well, you're just the opposite. Whatever doctor you went to, I need to go there, because I'm the opposite. I don't like the Lakers. I don't like all those guys. I don't like Worthy. The 30 for 30 was real. We're still talking noise right now. So wherever you went, I need to go there, because I didn't get that in my memo. I didn't get that.
Well,
where were you today? Do you remember where you were at? And we all do, when you found out that Kobe Bryant had passed away.
Well, just to make reference to, you thinking about all the things and players of your past. Tell you what, I know you say it jokingly and lightheartedly, but we can't get it back. It's just like, how we compare generations. You think about, people are like, well, who's the best? Like, which player is the best shooter, and who's the best dunker of all times, and who's this and that. And I was like, the numbers will lie to you, because the game changes. So the numbers never represent, you can't make a comparison through numbers. But even more so, it's just like a tennis shoe. Like, you remember the shoes you wore when you played.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that those shoes were terrible because you played them then. They meant something to you, and they might be your favorite shoes based on what they meant to you while you were growing up. Because for nostalgic purposes, I think everybody feels the way they do about that player, about that team, about that particular shoe, because it was something that meant something to them when they were growing up. And that, to me, you can't argue with a person over nostalgia. So, in present day, I think about things that mean something to me and how they've affected me growing up. And that's always going to be the case. And that's why I don't argue with people who have opinions about who they think the greatest player of all times was or the greatest shooter. But to answer your second question, I had a golf event that I had to participate in, a shootout in Hawaii. And I flew from Miami to Phoenix, and I landed in Phoenix about 10:15, and I had to wait an hour. Actually, it was 30 minutes. So we were a little delayed, and I was getting on the plane. And I remember trying to rush and get some water for the plane. And didn't think anything of it. I just got on the plane, and we took off. It was about 11:15, and my gate literally was across the hall from my departure gate was across the hall from where I arrived. And so it was another 6 hours to Hawaii, from Phoenix, which I didn't know was that long, but it was longer than I expected. And then I was sitting, and I kind of looked over. We were about to land, and I was looking over at the water in Hawaii, and I kind of looked over the seat. The woman, she had turned her phone on, and I seen Kobe Bryant in her phone, and I didn't think anything of it other than something. Kobe must have said something because she sounded like she was having a conversation about Kobe Bryant, and then I turned my phone on, and then I was walking off the plane, and I had about 60 text messages, because I had been in the air for 6.5 hours. And this happened, within the first 30, 45 minutes of when I took off in Phoenix, because I started playing over my head when it happened. And, you think of all the things you could have done, like call them, like you tell people to be safe all the time, because we say be safe, stay healthy, be safe, especially now during this pandemic. But those words, they really mean something. Like, you got to be safe out in the streets, and you want people to think about what they're doing. Don't rush. Don't take things for granted. Pay attention on the streets. Like, there are other crazy people that you got to protect yourselves from. So when I landed, I started looking at my phone, and my wife said, I need you to call me as soon as your phone comes on, because she was nervous because I was flying longer than she had expected. So everybody called me, and then I was walking through the terminal in Kona, and I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it, and it was tough because I was around a lot of people that wanted to have conversations just about basketball, about random stuff, and I was getting my bags, and I couldn't have a conversation. I couldn't talk. I was like, I'm sorry, but I don't want to talk right now, because I was trying to kind of understand this. Was this real? Like, you hear stuff like this all the time. To see someone so young be removed from the earth is tough. He has so much life to live, and you start to think, wow, this could have been anybody. This could be us. You think about what your kids would go through, what they'd have to deal with, and I was like, I was in the wrong place. What better place to be in was Hawaii, because it's so beautiful, but then I was so far away from my family that I felt, I guess I'm supposed to be here for a reason, but it's tough to be here and be alone in my family because they're struggling with this as well.
Right. It just seems like, to me, I just remember hearing the call, and we were actually, I think we were going to play the game in New Orleans at the time, and then to talk to a couple of players and see the shock look on their face. And even Jaylen Brown, I talked to him about it. And I turned to him, I said, Jaylen, I said, tough news. And the way he looked at me, it almost hurt me, because Jaylen said, I never met him. I never met Kobe. And that to me was like, wow. I just assumed that most of the players had met, all the great players had met Kobe before, and that didn't happen. And the way it was, I felt like I wanted to be a dad and pull him in, like hug him and say, son, it's going to be okay. But it just shows you how much life changes, with you and the people you're around. I'm going to ask you a question about, your day, continue on. The difference, talk about Boston, but I want you to talk about the comparison between Boston and Miami, not as fan base, but the players you played with. You had KG, and you had Paul, and you had Rondo. And then you transition, and you go to LeBron, and then you played with D Wade, younger players. And I remember one thing, I talked to D Wade about you, and we were talking about clothes. And D Wade thinks he's a fashionista. You already know that. And I would say, man, Ray's the cleanest brother I know. He said, what? Grandpa Ray, the suits he wears? And I was just shocked. But how did you, bring that together with those young guys and the older guys and you transitioning over there?
Well, let's take it back even a step further. I always say, basketball-wise, one of the tougher decisions that I had to make when I was in Seattle was, signing an extension there. And, we had a successful season and I was a free agent. And not until playing in Miami and Boston did I realize how we weren't prepared in Seattle. In Milwaukee, we were set up. We could have won if we, we were very close. But in Seattle, we weren't close, and the organization wasn't moving in a direction to put us in a position to win. And I didn't realize that until I went to Boston, because I saw what it was like and what it was to be on a championship team. Even though we hadn't won yet, the habits of all the guys that I played with, and primarily KG, he was starving. He had been so disappointed in being in Minnesota, and his work ethic was very similar to mine. Like, he knew he felt like he wasn't good enough, so he had to go in there every day and work, or else he wouldn't be able to do what he needed to do. And Paul followed suit with who we were.
Well, you guys seem like you made Paul grow into another player. When he was here and I saw him play all these years, playing with even Antoine, Paul kind of took it another way. But when you got there and Ray, and Kevin was there, it's like he transitioned to the captain and to a whole nother player.
Well, he certainly paid attention. I think that, for Paul, most of his career, he had been with a lot of younger players, and it was almost like Seabiscuit mentality, where once he saw like me come in, Paul would always talk trash about things that I was doing, but then you would always see he would gradually start doing them. He'd always talk trash about what I was eating, why I'm eating that, or how come I'm in the training room, I would start on one table and I'd end up on the other table. He's like, damn, you gonna touch every table? I was like, this is what it takes to exist for, like, you got to take care of yourself. And I think for most of his career, he was around younger players that didn't give him the ability to see what it is to be successful. So he was the one that was setting the tone every night, night in, night out. Once we got there, for him, it was easy because he felt like there are times where, he could cruise, but then when Paul and I Kevin and I got there, you couldn't. This is what we did every single day. It wasn't like, Tuesday we could take off or Thursday we take off. It was an everyday thing, and we were just relieved because we knew we didn't want to win. And so when we got there, you can tell he certainly saw the example set, and then we still had young players at the end of the roster. Rondo was trying to find his own, and then we had Big Baby, who was trying to learn to have an impact on the NBA. Perk was trying to come into his own, and, so a lot of those guys were taking cues from, the example that we set. I think the difference once I went to Miami, the difference was there was only one person really that was trying to make a name for himself. And you could throw Norris Cole in there coming off the bench. But Mario Chalmers was the one guy who was in the rotation that was young, but he was still a guy that had to follow so many other guys because, this locker room that I was in it had veterans from top to bottom. You're talking about, Juwan Howard, at the time he had, I think, 18 years in the NBA. And then you got guys like James Jones and Shane Battier and Mike Miller and Birdman and Rashard Lewis. You you got guys that have played, great basketball on other teams for a long time. So you can go in any direction when it comes to, who you're going to play. So, oftentimes I know it had to be difficult for Spoelstra because you got so many great shooters that you can put in the game, and you had to kind of deal with those egos. But, for the most part, a lot of guys, they were professional and everybody wanted to win.
I'll talk about even that when you talk about players that you played with, played against. But you look back over your career, man, what a career. I remember did you ever think you'd be the all-time three-point shooting leader? And I remember you shooting that shot, knocking it down that day. And where you came from initially when you were in college, you were like a mid-range jump shooter. And then your game turned into this long-distance bombs. It was crazy.
Well, I'll tell you, I remember Heather Walker came up to me, 2 years before I got the 3-point record, and she said, if you stay on this pace, you'll be the all-time leader in threes made. Now I looked at it, I was like, me? How? Like, how? Like, that certainly wasn't a goal of mine. That wasn't something that I was trying to do. It just, I didn't think I shot more threes than anybody else. I know I had some years in Seattle where we got the ball up and we shot it quick, but, I didn't think that I did anything, that was otherworldly. I just was consistent, and I like to think that I got to the basket as much as I shot threes. So I didn't change my game at all. When I was in Milwaukee, I had Vin Baker and Glenn Robinson early in my career where I had to stay and I shot more threes than I would have liked otherwise. So it came on me, and here I am. It became this thing, and so it goes back to my earlier point when we were talking about records and things that I've done and about comparisons. It's like people will say who the best shooter of all times is based on what that person meant to them, based on games they watched. But I will say that I remember standing at the free throw line and I was underneath the basket, and I think Birdman was in New Orleans at the time. And he looked over to me, he says, "Man, that was really cool. You getting a 3-point record like that. That game was awesome." And, you don't think that other people are really watching them around the league. Guys are watching games, but, other people have lives and things going on. So for him to say that at that time, I was like, wow, okay, I appreciate that. That's, something, you recognize another player's greatness out there on the floor. But even more so, the reverberation that is sent down through the college world and the high school world, because all these young guys are watching this on TV, and now I just gave them something to aspire to be. It's a record now that they say, okay, that's going to be me someday. Because now so much importance, such a spotlight was placed on it. Now they're like, this is something that I'm about to go out there and get. So now I see so many guys shooting a 3-ball now. And the one thing I said when I started this game is I was like, I wanted to have an impact on this game in the time that I played it to when the time I left. Because other than that, there's nothing else you can't do. You can't talk yourself into records after you retired. You hear some of these guys start saying how they're better than this player and they should be a Hall of Famer and this and that. And it's like, you can't talk yourself into Hall of Fame or into an All-Star game after you retired. Like you didn't leave it all out on the floor, and there's nothing more left that you can do now that you're retired. You hopefully left it all on the floor when you played.
Well, what a transition that was, because that's great, because I'm going to talk about your guy, KG, and now that he's going to go into the Hall of Fame and he's going to have his number retired here in Boston. I'll read one thing that Doc Rivers said. Doc Rivers said, Ray Allen, when he comes back to Kevin Garnett's retirement, he's going to get the greatest ovation. Your feeling about that?
I don't know why Doc is saying that. I don't know why he's I know he's speculating in hope that I am there. And, I think it's for Kevin, it's well deserved that he gets his jersey retired, and I'm proud of him. Most people, I'm sure some people know, but most people don't know that Kevin was always like my young brother growing up in South Carolina. So to see how far, we both have come from those days in South Carolina, and for him to get his jersey retired in Boston is an amazing accomplishment. I used to always say, like, when you walk into the Garden and you see all those jerseys up there, all those great players, like, I don't think in sports you see that, on any team, just the legends that go up in those rafters. So for him to have his name up there is an amazing accomplishment. And then to be announced to the Hall of Fame, again, I remember him when he was 14 years old. As far as me being there, I think that is, a subject that is really undecided yet. It would take Kevin and I to have a conversation, moving forward. And as you know, when I left as a free agent. I left because, there were so many unresolved issues that the team wasn't considering or, willing to change. As a free agent, you want to know that the team is going to do the things they need to do. And so, what is it now? It's 2020. So you're talking about, 9 years now. And, I've gotten so much hate, death threats, vitriol from Boston fans, from, obviously these guys have kind of removed me from the big three, said so many negative things about me. And I haven't had one negative thing to say about, any of them. We could talk about, the things that we went through. We've had tough times. We're brothers. We went through a lot. Yeah. But that doesn't change anything that we've done. And so it hurt me, over the course of this time, just to hear, just some of the things that have been said. It is like, we're supposed to be celebrating, these times, having won in 2008. We're supposed to be celebrating and talking about all the great times. But instead, they want to be mad at me because I left and went to Miami.
As a free agent, though, you got to add that in. As a free agent.
Just like, I always say, it was one of in 2008, we were at the ESPYs, and we were coming downstairs and found out that Posey had signed with New Orleans. And we had no idea, no inkling. And we were like, Pose, we come downstairs, like, you signed with New Orleans. What happened? He was like, Danny wouldn't give me the fourth year. Something, I don't know if it was the third or fourth year, but he was like, Danny wouldn't give it to me. So New Orleans offered it to me. And so I was like, well, I'm not mad at you because, our situation at the time, we're okay. That's what you got to deal with in your family because you're going through free agent. And that's the situation you have to deal with. I can't live in that man's house and tell him how to do his business. And to me, that was like, that's what I always knew. And that's what I always expected. Like it's a business that we all got to make sure that we are on the right side of our families and on the right side of who we are to be able to go out there and do our job. So when it came to it and, we were trying to get this deal done and everything kind of somewhat went awry. And now all of a sudden the backlash came from, and I was like, wait a minute, what happened to being a free agent? And, you moving on, like you had every opportunity to make sure I stayed and everybody knew about this, all year. Because we tried to negotiate, during the year, but it was told to us that we're going to wait till the season ends. So, so be it. So, to me, it's been disappointing just to know that when you spend time with people and you share so much, all the stuff that's been said, like, I've been over everybody's house, I've had everybody over my house. Like we've spent so many days, our families together. And then for this to be where it is because they're mad at me because I left, this is very disappointing.
I think that in my mind, I hope you come back. And I understand where you're at because when I left Boston, when I got traded to the Clippers, I felt like my teammates talked about me in a negative way. And I started thinking about all those years that we won championships together, all the things we had done. All I wanted them to do, and I'm sure this is the same way with you, once you decided to go, wish me luck because I'm going to wish you luck.
Yeah.
And I think that's what really killed me about hearing certain things said about me at the end of the day that was disappointing when I didn't see somebody step up. And I've heard different things about KG and he lost your number and Ray didn't do this. But I thought that was a facade because I thought that you guys, especially what you're saying, two guys from South Carolina, you would never have that in your DNA because we know how it is being in the South where you play. It's a kinship that you have. When you win championships together, it's a kinship, it's a bond. Nobody can ever take it away from you. And I just remember me as a broadcaster sitting there watching you guys. And even after you won your first championship here, that second year was even more special. You guys were 25 and 3 before KG got hurt. I thought you were on your way to win 70 games that year, the way you were playing. So I guess I'm saying I understand where you're at, and I hope that KG reaches out, you reach out. However it's done, I hope that you come back because I was just like you. I said I would never come back to Boston. I always felt that in my mind. And then when Larry Bird had his retirement, they asked me, so you're going to come back? And I said, man, I don't know. I'm not really feeling it. Maybe my fans, teammates are. And at the end of the day, when I did come back, it was maybe the best decision I made because I think you just, after a while, you learn that those people didn't, they booed you because I think they loved you. If you're insignificant, if you're not, then you just go about your way. But because they loved you so much, I think they felt they were hurt. But they didn't understand, to me, the business of the game. Because all I've seen from Ray Allen was total professional, guy who played the game, who set an example, won championships. And at the end of the day, I still remember you we were in actually LA. You were out by the swimming pool and they were talking about trading you that day. Yep. And I remember you sitting out by the pool in LA. I have never seen somebody so calm in my life when they start talking about trading. And you had this, the rest of the year, you didn't get traded, and you had this unbelievable shooting run that you went on. So I kind of understand where you're at, but again, I hope you come back.
Yeah, and it's something that I'm not one of those people that, you get so stubborn and you don't. I've been stubborn, I should say over the course of my life, but once you have kids, you realize that you can't be stubborn. You have to grow and you have to evolve and you have to adapt. And, the things that you go through, my character has been assassinated, often, and it's not just, through this situation. Like, people don't know who you are. They mistake you for something that you said. Like, I don't have any ill will towards anybody. My intentions were always to win basketball games, and oftentimes I got the blame because if it was something that I wasn't doing or something that I was doing and something somebody else wasn't doing, then it was easier to point the blame at me because I could take it. Right. I have broad shoulders. I can take it. I can deal with it. You could yell at me all day long and it's not going to cause me to feel any kind of way. It's just what you need to do to get this team going. And so oftentimes, you push me in situations where over time you erupt. And I had two sayings where, the squeaky wheel gets the oil and empty cans make a lot of noise. And so I had to make sure that I wasn't an empty can. So when I spoke, I was speaking from a position of real worth and understanding and merit. And then I had to make sure that I stood up and spoke for myself when the time came for them to respect me and what it was that I brought to them on the floor. And I think at times I didn't do that. And so you get to a situation where everybody says stuff like, oh, he will be all right. He's going to be okay. And I always found myself in a situation where, yeah, I will be okay, but how come my thoughts and my feelings don't matter in certain situations? And so that is always a classic example to remember. Like, don't just assume someone is okay, your kids, whatever. Like, you got to communicate with them. You got to have conversation with them and make sure that they are okay, and to let them know that you're thinking about them, and you know the sacrifice they're making, or how well they're playing, or just whatever it may be, whether it's the starting five, guys on the bench, like your strength coach, like things like that. Because if you run a team and you hope to be a championship team, you got to make sure that everybody is of championship caliber, and everybody's mind has to be strong and ready to move forward. And I think that's what ultimately ends up happening is once you start winning, everybody wants a piece of the large pie. You know, when we win in 2008, you know, you get to the point where you have young players, and now all-star teams want to be made, and more minutes need to be had, and you know, it's like, no, you actually have to go back to doing what you were doing, and we all have to appreciate that and respect that. And I think it's so much that you learn over the course of your career, and then sitting back, being retired and thinking about it. It's like, I'm fortunate that I won twice, you know, and I don't compare the two because each year's presented their own dilemmas and hardships, but I don't compare the two, and I cherish both of them. But in the same token, everybody I played with allowed me to grow. You know, even the negative relationships I had, they allowed me to grow and understand who I needed to be moving forward and how to be a better leader. But because, you know, when we lost games, Max, you were on the plane, we talked more after we lost than, you know, after we won. Like, yeah, we'd be celebrating or listening to music when we won, but we had more real conversations after we lost because we knew we wanted to get it figured out. And this wasn't coach mandated. It was because we were ultimate competitors, and we wanted to find out what the best scenario was going forward.
I think that's really why, you know, why I started out this conversation, why I felt so kindred to you, because it was the same way when I had Bill Fitch and I was here playing with Larry Bird. There were many days where he yelled at me about a defensive assignment, and it was Larry's guy.
Yeah.
Well, why aren't you yelling at him? Yeah. I didn't do anything. And it made me feel like, but as you said, I think that's the difference. And I think, again, because you and I are alike, both military fathers, that there's certain things about that they put stuff on your shoulders, and they put it on your shoulders for a reason, because you can take it. But like you said, too, it comes a time when you get tired of taking it. Not that you can't take it, but it's just sometimes you just like, man, you know, I've had enough. Okay, do this to somebody else, or at least come to me and talk to me about it and say,
be fair. Be fair across the board. That's the thing that disappointed me the most when I was gone was nobody, you know, because I even had this conversation with Stephen A. Smith on SportsCenter, because because, you know, 4 or 5 guys were having a conversation about me, he took everything for what they were saying as truth and as facts. And I said, you know, he's almost questioned me, saying that I was a bad teammate. And I said, so every time you came in the locker room, I sat down, spoke to you, gave you whatever you need. We had a conversation. Like, you guys would always say I'm a consummate professional. And the minute somebody else says something about me, all of a sudden you lose everything that you talked to me about and have said about me. You know, just in that 2 minutes, all of a sudden you're believing everything and you throw me underneath the bus. It was like, what bothered me was that more people, you know, just, it became one-sided. It was like one side was saying all these bad things about me, and nobody protected or even defended me and said, no, Ray wasn't a bad teammate. Ray wasn't a problem in the locker room. You know, I was hearing all this, that I was a problem in the locker room. I was like, wow. Like,
well, let me tell you this. As a media person, I am that person who steps up. I'm one of the biggest Ray Allen fans around. I'm the one that keeps saying, Ray Allen, the next jersey has to be retired. It's going to be Ray Allen's here in Boston, because you were such an integral part. It wasn't the big two. It was the big three. And to me, defending you, I hear people get so emotional about it. And, well, Ray left and he did that. I say he was a free agent. He played his ass off. He gave an example. What more did you want him to do? like Bill Belichick said, you did your damn job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then you think about it, because I had a interview with some guy out of Boston, and he wanted to kind of run me through the mud in the interview, and try to make me look like an idiot or a clown, whatever. And, that's what I said to him. I was like, he was like, you left us. I was like, I played 5 years. I left as a free agent. Like, can you not leave after you're a free agent here and go somewhere else? Like, I've watched, the situation unfold. I seen what happened with Isaiah Thomas. I seen what happened with Al Horford. Like, I get it. People might have felt a different way about me. But always in the vein, we are players that have to decide what's best for us, because the organizations move forward. They trade you, they get rid of you, they cut you. And so it wasn't a knock on anybody. It wasn't disrespectful. I wasn't mad at anybody when I left. It was simply put, like, if you're not moving forward in the direction of what we need as the Allen family, then we have to move on and find what we need to find for ourselves so we can be successful. And, it was a shame, because the Boston was the place that I loved playing. Like, I finally felt like I was somewhere that, when you're moving through the city, although it was tough being a Celtic, you knew that every night people were tuning into the games. People were like rabid about what was going on with the Boston Celtics and everything. And that to me was like, it is special. Like, you have to be a special breed of character to play there. That's why, I watched the whole, the saga with Kyrie Irving, and it was so interesting, because I said, there's a lot of people here that are watching him, and, on the team they're gone, but, once he's gone, it's going to be a different scenario, because you have to be a certain breed of character, like, to be in that uniform, and not only to play great basketball every night, but you have to stand there and do interviews and be a leader. And being a Celtic is a different animal from anywhere else that I've ever played, because there's competing papers that demand the consistency out of you. They demand your ability to be transparent and speak with the media. And if you can't do that, the fans see that right away, and they're, in a sense, they run you right out of town.
Well, before I let you go, man, it was absolutely a pleasure having you. And I'm gonna say this and make sure say it to your face here. I'm gonna call KG. I'm gonna talk to KG my damn self. I'm because when I was at Paul's retirement, I was hoping so much you'd be there. And as a family member, as a legend with this organization, I don't give a damn about all this other stuff. But I want you back here, and I want the fans to appreciate you like I do, because I know there's so many fans that do appreciate you as a player. And if you get the chance to come back and KG gives you a call, I hope you guys can talk about it as men, squash it, and get on with your lives, and come to his retirement and get the love I think that you deserve.
And I'll say this, Max, and I said this a little bit earlier, but I never had any ill will towards Kevin. This is not a two-way argument or debate. This is him. He dug his heels in the sand, and he decided that I'm not a brother of his anymore. And so I said, cool. I moved forward. I have a family. I'm retired, and I move on. And I'm not going to go anywhere where I'm not wanted. And I do believe that sentiment, I've been relayed, quite often, through social media from so many different outlets. So it's easy, because even with the Paul situation, how many people told me to stay away from Boston? And then when Paul's jersey retirement, everybody got mad at me there. I was never invited. And so I didn't even know when it was. So yeah, I would have loved, because you share those moments with those guys, and they did special careers, but there's so much more politics behind it, and it's just about men just having conversations and saying, you know what, that I don't have any beef, or there's no situation, I don't feel some kind of way towards you, but you don't walk into a hornet's nest when people have vendettas against you, and that's kind of how it's been for me for the last 9 years. And so I just important. My family is very important. I got to make sure that I do what I do.
Well, good luck to you, my brother. I appreciate you coming on with me. You have a good one. Stay safe.
All right, Max. Thanks for having me on.
All right.